she had a guy show up in court who wasn't even an attorney, but he pretended to be an attorney and tried to represent her. And the judge, upon finding out he wasn't an attorney, there was nothing done. He let my wife and this guy walk out of court as if nothing had happened. You know, I wasn't crazy about it, but I was allowed to get my son back that day, so there really wasn't much I could do. But at the same time, they still treated me like I broke some federal law. I mean, they were going all out against me. I was still facing the parental kidnapping charges. The abuse charges were thrown out, and then at that time they said, well, let's charge him with assault then. This was after the abuse charges were thrown out for the same charge. Okay, I had to fight that. About this time, I hadn't been working because I had to keep going back and forth to court, and I was missing a lot of work. But I wasn't going to give up on my son, so I kept fighting and I kept fighting. And well, around about that time, I ran out of money, so the lawyer said, well, I can't take your case any longer, so I had to learn how to become my own attorney. I had to stay up late at night. There was a library at the university, Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. I would stay up till they closed at 2 o'clock in the morning. I learned how to write motions, okay? I learned what the rules of civil procedure were. I learned what the rules of criminal procedure were. I had to fight my own divorce case, had to fight my own criminal case, and well, I'm still here today, but I won all the cases eventually, but I still don't have my son. The prosecutor in the parental kidnapping case, I guess I'm her own personal vendetta now, so she's helping my ex to try to do everything they can to keep my son from me, so I guess they don't like losing, so.
When's the last time you saw your son?
February the 6th, 12 o'clock noon at the exchange. By that time, my ex-wife had gotten her copy of the final divorce decree from the judge, and she had already known that the judge gave her full custody, so she never worried about calling me back. She never showed up, and when I did try to show up to get my son, the police department where she lives at, where the same police officer lived at, filed false police reports on me. Another officer told me if I showed back up there again to see my child, that they were going to arrest me. So I had to learn how to file another lawsuit, but I went to federal court this time and had to file a lawsuit against that officer, the initial officer that filed the false police reports, the other officers who refused to enforce my court order when I tried to go there to get my son, the prosecutor in the case. I couldn't file against the judge because he had blanket immunity. So,
is that case still pending right now in the federal court?
That case is pending. It was before Judge Stephen Limbaugh. I just got a letter a couple of weeks ago saying it was changed to his son's courtroom, Judge Stephen Limbaugh Jr. So,
you mentioned earlier that the Violence Against Women's Act was disproportionate to African Americans. Are you referring to any type of statistics or data that you've had an opportunity to review or to publish?
Yes. The FBI, according to them, they say that mostly men, African American men, are disproportionately affected by mandatory arrest policies. That blacks represent 23% of all spouses and 35% of all boyfriends or girlfriends arrested for partner aggression. But we account for probably 70 to 80% of those that's in prison. And a lot of that starts with mandatory arrest policies, whether they be drug arrest policies or domestic abuse arrest policies. And the African-American community, it's harder for them to fight those cases because the wealth isn't there. When it comes to their counterpart, they're least likely to be able to bond out. They're least likely to be able to afford an attorney. And therefore, they're least likely to be able to do anything other than accept a plea bargain or be found guilty, and that takes them away from their family still.
Now, what happens if you're found guilty?
If you're found guilty for domestic violence, it depends on whether or not it's a misdemeanor or a felony. But most of the times, there is incarceration. In my case, I was initially found guilty of an assault charge, but I had appealed it. And there was a female judge in my case. She held that decision for 5 months. We went to court in September of 2004, and she didn't render her decision until February of 2005. And it just so happened to coincide with the same time the judge in my divorce case rendered his decision. So, I mean, she did all this even after my wife had perjured herself in the courtroom. I had a police report from where my wife had abused me previously. There were several times I had to call the police on my ex-wife for domestic abuse, but
and she wasn't arrested,
they refused to arrest her. So the one time that they did, they turned around and let her go, and the prosecutor refused to even prosecute her.
You mentioned that this act comes up for renewal every 5 years. When was the last time that it was up for renewal? It was
2004. So it'll be back up for renewal again next year.
And you mentioned for Bill H.R. 6088. Have you spoken with any candidates that support this?
I have sent faxes. I've sent emails to my congressmen, to both of my state senators, Senator Obama and Senator Durbin. In March 14th of this year, several of us from AAVR and another group called Radar, we went to D.C. and we lobbied the Congressional Black Caucus and several other members of Congress about this very issue. And we want them to know that even as well-intended as VAWA was, it's being misused, and it's harming families, it's harming children, okay? And they're allowing people to make false allegations with no threats of being prosecuted for making false reports or perjuring themselves in court. So. And
did anything come about from going up to the to lobby for at the Congressional Black Caucus?
We met with some opposition, but we did have a couple of people who wanted to hear some of the personal anecdotes, especially once they heard my story. So they needed to find out just how this is affecting people around the country, especially the African American community. They want to know how many people are getting locked up because of this, because of false allegations and being sent to jail and not being able to fight these things. So at this moment, we're still trying to compile all that data to get back with them, give them the correct numbers.
Now, can this information be found on your website?
If it's not exactly on our website, we have links to different websites that information can be found on.
What is, for our viewers, what is your website?
That's aavreform.org, O-R-G.
And the other website that you're referring to, if it's not on that website, what is the site for that one?
It's Media Radar.
Media Radar?
Right, .org.
And is your contact information on there, so if someone wants to follow up or send you an email, letter, fax?
Sure, it sure is.
And since you're up there in Denver dealing with the political situations that are going on this week and then next week for the Republican Party, is there any political solutions that you would recommend?
Well, what I would do, especially since Senator Biden is now the vice president pick, he is the author of the Violence Against Women's Act. So what I would ask is that Senator Biden and everybody else that has anything to do with women's issues or the domestic violence issue or